Hey, what's good? My name is SATURDAE and this is part 11 of my EDM production series. This video today is going to be a little bit longer because what we're going to do is we are going to completely get everything through drop 1 kind of finalized. It's not going to be 100%, but I want to get it like 90% done. And the first thing I want to start with is this snare. I want this snare to, I want to change this sample and get it to pop out in the mix a bit more. So here's what it sounds like right now. So it sounds okay, but I think we can find a better one. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to open up this sampler and I'm going to find a snare sample that I like for this, and I will be right back. Okay, so I found this snare sample. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to open this sampler up and I'm just going to drag and drop this in. And something really cool with the sampler in Logic is when you load in a new sample, you still have the original one that you can go back to. So you can do that for however many instances you have. Now you're going to notice something when I hit play on this. I'm going to solo this channel real quick and you're going to notice something. It sounds like really terrible. It's just like super low pitched. And if I play the original, it sounds like that. Now the reason for that, if we look at this sampler here, it says its root key is C3. And then if I open up our pattern region, I'm pressed E to do that. You can see it says D sharp 2. So what I want to do is I'm going to click in here, go to C and go to C3, which is our root key. And now when I hit play, it sounds like the sample. But these regions, you have to do it for each instance of it, which is a little annoying. So C3. Now you can also go into this sampler and change the key here as well. So I could have pulled this down to D sharp 2, I think was what the pattern region was saying. That's another option. Usually I just do it within the sampler itself and leave this at C3. But now we have this snare. And it sounds good, but I want to give it a little bit more body. So I'm going to layer this. If I try and hit Command D on this track to copy it, it's not letting me. That's because it's stuck in this drum machine designer. And for whatever reason, sometimes when you leave a session, this will kind of like get filled out and it won't let you insert new samples into here. So I'll show you a way around that in just a second, but I'm going to find a snare that I think sounds okay to potentially layer this with. Okay, and I found this snare, Snare Serum. And I like this because it's kind of deep and it doesn't have a lot of high energy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this here and I'm going to drag this to this section. And you saw that like delay there. It's just because it's leaving the Splice app window to go back into Logic. So sometimes there's a delay. So if you just hover there, it'll be fine. I'm going to close that window, expand this. And now this is the sampler. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to drag this right next to our other drum sampler here. And we can get rid of both of these channels down here. We don't need those anymore. What I'm going to do, I'm going to copy these pattern regions here and drag them up. And I'm just going to click and drag these up above my claps and change the icons. I just like my snares right here after my kick. That's just always where I put them. So that's why. And I'm going to rename these real quick. So I want to quickly make sure that this sample is loaded in correct, which it is not. So root key is C sharp 2, and the pattern region is saying C3. Just so that we have some variation, you can see it done differently. I'm going to just pull this up to C3. And now it sounds like the sample. So I'm going to close Splice for now. Two things that are really important with snares is when you're looking for a lead snare, I would recommend looking for samples while your track is playing. It can be really easy to find a snare that sounds good isolated and then it just doesn't fit in your mix. It has like way too much energy or not enough. So for the main snare, I would always try and have everything playing together. When you're looking for a layer for it, I would recommend either having this soloed or just kind of going in with a idea of what you're looking for and drag in a few samples and toggle between them and see what works best. So once you have kind of a ballpark idea of what you want to go for, what I would do is I would open up both these samplers, or if you're working with audio, just check the intro part of the audio. And you want to make sure that these transients, these initial transients here are starting at the same time. Sometimes you'll get a sample and it'll load in and start like right here, or it'll have like a long drag out before the attack happens. And you can end up with something kind of sounding like this, where it just sounds like weird. Like you can hear a delay and it sounds like two different snares. In some cases though too, you can use this to just get the tail of something. So like say you like the reverb from this and you like the top end, you can just kind of drag that out to do that as a layer. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure that these both start at about the same time, which they do. There's no really delay between them. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that these kind of match to the main snare. So I'm going to, whatever my main is, I want my other one to kind of match that length. So sample end is 2.81 or 0.281, sorry. So I'm going to drag it there. And I'm going to do a little bit of a fade in just to avoid any potential like click or pop or anything. So we'll just do like a 0.5 millisecond fade in there. And I can see that right here. So now we have these two samples. Here's without and with. So it's just giving it a lot more body, but we want to mix this. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to load in an EQ here, and I'm going to filter off a good amount of the highs because we're going to leave our main snare to have that. Now you do want to be careful going too aggressive with filters on snares, especially when layering, because it can start to sound really unnatural and weird if you go too aggressive. But I'm just going to roll off up to about like 80-ish. And normally I don't like this tone, but for this, I think this is kind of what I'm looking for right in this range. I'm going to drop this range here, just because I know that's where our lead snare is going to be hitting. And I'm going to use dynamic EQ in this spot here, just to reduce some of this. We want to preserve this like initial like transient punch here, but we also want to control where it's going to get kind of messy. Now I am going to unsolo this just to make sure I'm not thinning it too much. I think that sounds okay. So next I'm going to load in an 1176 compressor with a fast setting. And something like that sounds all right. And the last thing I'm going to load in for this snare is I'm going to do I'm going to clip it a little bit. I am going to soften this because it has more low frequencies. And I'm just going to kind of guess with the threshold here. And I'm going to try and get like, I don't know, as much clipping as I can without causing significant distortion. I think something like that might be okay. And I want to send this to a reverb, and you'll notice because a new channel was made, it automatically created these tracks. So I'm going to get rid of these. I'm going to change this to our drum reverb here. And you'll notice when I pull this up, this fader icon, this little line here is blue, and normally it's green. That indicates that it's set to post fader. There's also pre-fader, which will be denoted with this on the left side, and then your default, which is post-pan. In 90% of cases, you're going to be using post-pan. What these refer to is just when this signal is getting sent in the chain. Post-pan is what we're using like 90% of the time. You're sending that after everything. So after all fader adjustments, after all panning, and all the processing. Pre-fader is being sent after any fader adjustments, but say you have panning going on, it will not register that panning and it'll just send it out center. This is a very rare thing to use. I've used it like maybe 5 times or so. It's not super common. Other genres might have more of a use for that than I do, but I just never find myself really needing to use that. And then finally, there's pre-fader. So pre-fader just sends your information before any fader adjustment. So if you have this pulled down and you have it panned, it'll send that information out at unity gain at 0 and pan center. There's only really 2 examples I can think of why this is useful. One is for headphone mixes, and this makes it so that you can use this kind of as like a gain tool to send different information at certain volumes while keeping all of your actual levels and panning the same throughout your mix. So you can like make a separate mix that helps a vocalist sing a little bit better. For example, if they wanted more kick, but you don't actually want to turn up your kick in your track because it's set good, you can use this as a tool to do that instead. I don't really find myself using this that often, to be honest. I've tested around with it. I can do it if singers want it, but it's not really that necessary in my opinion. The other thing that pre-fader is used for is for setting up ghost kicks. I'm going to cover that later, probably after mastering, but those are like the 2 reasons why pre-fader is used. But we're going to keep this at post-pan. I'm going to turn this wet down a good amount. And now I want to go to our main snare here. And we are going to load in an EQ here. And we're going to roll off all of this because we don't really need it. And once again, I think I'm just going to use dynamic EQ here. I might cut it a little bit. I'm going to give it a little boost here. And I think I'm going to give it a little bit of brightness, but let's unsolo this real quick and see how it sounds. So I was using auto gain there just to try and get like some compensation to get a more accurate before and after, and I really like the tone that it was giving me there. It's not 100% accurate, but I do really like the way that this snare sounds in the mix now. So let's compress this. I'm also going to be using the 1176 with the fast setting for this one as well. Okay, and we can clip this one as well. Soften this a little bit, maybe to like 15. Okay, so here's the snare in the mix now. And I think I'm going to switch from having this boost to using upwards compression. So I'm going to set a threshold up here. And what this is saying is that anything under this threshold set can get louder. So it's kind of like a less committed boost essentially. So if I copy this, the dynamic one is more controlled. This one's, the boost is a lot louder. This is still kind of achieving that, but it's just not going so aggressive with it. So let's hear that in the mix. All right, and let's send this to a reverb, put it in a space with the rest of the drums. Okay, so I think that sounds all right. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to create a summing stack for these snares. And I'm just gonna name this snare sum. I'm gonna give it a snare icon. And I want to add some processing on here. I'm gonna switch this to a linear phase mode. And I'm just gonna set a filter here at 10. And I'm just gonna quickly automate this. And we're gonna pull this up. And I want to create tension by removing a bunch of the highs as it goes up. And I like to set another point a little bit further down. So when I remove this, it doesn't immediately fall down. I want the reverb to kind of end naturally. So I usually do a little like ramp like this, just so it can kind of naturally taper off. And so now our snares sound like this. So it gets a little bit more thin, but I want to make it even more thin. So what I'm going to do, I am going to select both of these, and I'm going to go to our main, and I'm going to select our drum verb here and choose absolute. And we're going to copy this automation. I'm also going to make sure that this automation here for that filter, I want it to end or get to its thinnest point on that last hit. And we're going to make a couple of points here for the reverb as well. And we'll just remember to put that other dot over here. And we'll set one at the end here as well. And make sure there's one at the very beginning here. Okay, so now I can pull this up. So now we have an automation that kind of simulates what our EQ filter here is doing. And I'm going to create the same type of bend here. I'm probably going to pull the lower reverb down a little bit more because I don't want a bunch of low frequencies getting sent through the reverb really aggressive. But if we solo this, it sounds like this now. Okay, I might pull this one down a little bit tighter. And I think as well, I'm going to have these first notes not be filtered at all. So I'm going to extend this here, and I'm going to do the same thing with the reverb. So I'm just going to match this so it's 16.3, create a new bend here, make this one -22. Sometimes you have to zoom in really insane. Okay, so we'll bend this one as well. And I think I want this filter to go a little bit faster up. So we'll adjust these reverbs a little bit. We can maybe bring this filter up even more aggressive here. And I'm still noticing that this low snare is popping through a little bit more. So I think I'm going to do some volume automation on this as well, just to turn it down a tiny bit as it gets louder so it's not kind of like overpowering. So I'm just going to pull this down like a couple of dB. Try something like that. Okay, so now we have this snare that sounds like this. And I went into this drum reverb and I ended up extending this EQ so it rolled off a little bit more of those lows. I feel like a little too much for getting through. I tried a few different drum variations for the snare to try and change it up a little bit just because it felt a little bit boring, but I didn't really find anything I like. So I'm just going to leave that there so I can kind of move on. One last thing I want to do though is I want to come over to under audio units in Logic. if you go to Apple, you can go to AU pitch. And I found if you turn the tightness all the way up and smoothness all the way down, it gives a kind of decent pitch shift. So I'm going to go to AU pitch and click pitch. There's a bunch of different like pitch algorithms that you can use, or like pitch plugins. This is just a free one, and I've used some like paid ones. I've even tried like Melodyne for this, and I feel like this one seems to work the best. But I'm going to try pulling this up like 6 semitones and just see how this sounds. Pull this down like that. Let's try 12 semitones. So a full octave here. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this one out even more. And so it won't accelerate until the very end. Okay, so with that pitch shift, now we have something that sounds like this. Yeah, I think that sounds all right. Let's move on. I think it would be cool to test adding some shakers in. So I'm going to go and look for some shakers real quick. And those can be found under shakers and percussion. For these, I usually like looking for loops, and we'll just do like house. And when I'm looking for shakers, a lot of times I will have the track playing just so I can kind of listen for what fits it as well. Same kind of thing with the snare. So I actually really like these ones. I think these are like subtle and fit. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to drag this in. Just going to drag it in as an audio track, drag it to 9 here. And I'm going to look for something that's a little bit deeper. This might be a little too aggressive, but I'm going to try it. So I think this might work. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to activate flex time. I'm going to activate it on both of these tracks, and I'm going to set both of these to monophonic. Again, when you're using flex time, generally polyphonic just gives like weird distortion to it. And then I'm just going to grab on these corners and make sure that they're in beat with the song. And I know that they're in beat because these are 2-bar loops. So I just dragged them to 11, and now they should be on time. And let's listen to what they sound like together. I think that sounds all right. So let's highlight both these guys. I'm going to drag them all the way up to our drum mix here. And I'm going to drag these into our percussion sum. So these are in the percussion sum stack. And when I try and make an additional nested stack to put these in their own group, it's not letting me. Logic limits how many nested stacks you can create, which drives me insane. I don't understand why they do that, but there's kind of a cheat way around this. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to drag both of these out. I'm going to create a summing stack outside of that one. And now I can drag this into this drum mix. So I'm going to drag it above this percussion sum. And now it's placed within my drum mix. So if I collapse it like that, but I kind of want this below all the percussion towards the end. So I'm going to drag this, now that it's part of the drum stack, I'm going to drag it underneath this set here. And now that it's above this stack, what I can do is I can drag this one above this one to put it at the bottom, because I don't want it at the top. I just have kind of a flow. And now when I collapse it, it collapses with all of them. So it's kind of annoying that you have to do that kind of a workaround, but that's what I found for reorganizing. So I'm going to give this little icon, and I'll name this shaker sum. All right. And now I'm going to send both of these to, our drum bus for reverb. Sorry, a drum reverb track. Give them a little bit of reverb. I'm going to also delete these tracks that were created when we made the sampler, because we don't need those. And I'm going to start by mixing these low shakers. I'm going to set this at unity, and let's shorten this loop a little bit. So these ones are really like a top end. And I'm kind of going for like a bandpass, like low mid feel for this channel. So something like that might be okay. And now I could compress this, but there's a really, really cool plugin that I have called Transient Master. If you don't have this, you can still achieve this through compression. I forget who makes this. I got it free with something. If you set it to smooth, you can actually adjust the attack. So I can make it basically gone, or I can increase it. In this case, I kind of want to reduce it a little bit. And I can increase the sustain, or I can bring it down. And again, I want to bring this down and make it just really tight. So this is before and after. And I also really like adding on tremolo to my shakers to give them movement. I usually do a little bit lower tremolo for the lower shakers and higher tremolo for the higher ones. This did tame a good amount of the transients. I am going to compress this anyway with just a digital compressor though, just to control any like extra spikes in there. Like there's some harsh percussion coming through on that. All right, now let's mix this guy. So I'm hearing some sharpness around here. Yeah, this region up here is just a little bit sharp. So I think what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna change this to a band, and I'm gonna set this to do the spectral resonance suppression. Tighten this up a little bit, do a fast attack and a fast release. Just something like that. I'm gonna use transient master on this as well, set it to smooth. Bring that attack down a little bit, tighten up the sustain a tiny bit, give it some compression. And on this one, I could hear some side information already. I'm just going to use a side EQ here and just reduce some of that stereo imaging a tiny bit. Might even just do a dynamic side EQ. And now it's just a little bit more controlled. It still has that stereo width, but it's just not like causing phase issues. And I do want to try something, so I'm going to duplicate this main channel. What I'm noticing is that these low ones are a lot more on beat than the main ones. So I do kind of want to try and tighten those up a tiny bit. So I kind of tighten this up a little bit, and you can make these little markers and drag them to speed them up or slow them down. You do want to be careful with this though, because sometimes you can create really weird like artifacts when you do it, but it still has a groove and it's still like not completely on time. I wanted to keep some of that humanized element, but I'll show a before and after. It's really subtle, and I really just kept that timing down in the first section, and then it kind of tapers off and goes back to being slightly out of time. But just when you initially pick it up in your ears, it kind of fits a little bit better, and then it's kind of like loosens out a little bit later. All right, and so I'm going to duplicate this track, and I'm going to render it in place, and I'm going to delete the track. And now that I've done that, I can also just bypass all these plugins because they were rendered in place with it, and I can also set this back to Unity because it made the gain adjustments for me there. I'm also going to duplicate this track, and we're going to do the same thing. And again, we can bring this back up to Unity, and let's just make sure these sound okay. And one last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add on a bus compressor onto this shaker sum just to kind of get them in the same space with each other a little bit more. It's very gentle. And I'm going to add a gain plugin here just so that we can turn it up without kind of pushing this above 0. I'm just weird. I don't like pushing my faders above 0. And I'll just kind of turn this up until it sounds nice. Maybe something like that sounds okay. And now I can copy these over, and they're all processed and everything. And now they're playing through our mix like that. And again, these aren't perfectly on time. I'm totally okay with that. It kind of adds like a humanized element to it. I kind of like it. So everything doesn't have to be perfectly on time all the time. It's kind of like this is one of those things that's just going to be subjective. I kind of like it. You might not. That's okay. And I'm not sure if I'm going to have these extend into the build or not yet. For now, I'm going to mute those with a Control M so that I can like know that they're there and know that I have an idea for that. Let me recolor these real quick, and we'll leave that as is for right now. Okay, so there's something I want to do with this this Reese bass to kind of make it a little bit more interesting. Now, this is going to be a little bit complicated, but in essence, all we're going to have to do is we are going to go to Serum 2, we are going to go to macros, and we are going to click on this angry macro. Now, I made a macro in this preset that we made. Now, this gets a little bit confusing, so I'll try and explain this in as much detail as I can. I wanted to have a knob that kind of does a multitude of things to make the sound a little bit more intense, and also gives like a fluttery, like offbeat movement. So under this effects tab, I added a couple of new settings. The first thing I added was this distortion. I used this really aggressive, I don't know how to pronounce this, like diode or whatever. I set it to post, and I set it around 1000. I know that's just like a kind of sharper, brighter frequency. I set the drive to 100, and then I set the mix at 0, and I'll explain what these like blue things are in just a second. And then this is now getting processed through yet another low pass filter. I set the cutoff to match the same cutoff as this filter is, and I set the mix at 100%. Now, I set this macro to trigger on the hyperdimension mix. So when I turn this up, you'll see when I hit play, it turns up the mix knob there. And that just adds more voices and creates this like cool, like sharp tone. under our distortion here, this also, as I pull this up, is increasing this cue point here, so it's making a little resonance at 1000 hertz. And it's also increasing the mix of how much distortion is being applied. So at 0, there's none. As I pull this up, it goes up to 50% because I didn't want to completely saturate it with that sound. And because I'm pulling the mix up, I'm also pulling the drive down. So that's why this is set to 100%. I have this pulling it back as it goes up so it doesn't get too intense. And the only other thing I did was I made this LFO and I set it to retrigger. I kept it at 0.5 because that's almost, that's like about like 1/4. It kind of matches where the original filter movement was at. I think technically it's like 0.4. Yeah, it's somewhere between 0.4 and 0.5. Doesn't really matter. It's like basically on par with this original LFO we made that's on beat for each bar. And what this is doing is this is being applied to this final filter. And I have it set at that exact same cutoff again as this original one. And it's opening up these frequencies. And this LFO is controlled by this macro. So I know this gets a little confusing, but all I did was I dragged this macro to the right here. I set it to the minimum limit that I want it to flutter at and the maximum limit I want it to flutter at. So now when I pull this up, you'll see this speed up. And I also switched this to the hertz so it's not on time. So it kind of speeds up and does that cool effect. So it just, in essence, what it's doing is when you turn this up, it creates more harsh resonances, more sharper tones, opens the filter up a tiny bit more, and adds some like speed variance to it. Of course, this is still getting processed previously by all these other filters and stuff, so it's not going to bring out all these crazy highs. So even if I open this filter up a lot more, it's not really going to do much. I'm going to resave this, and I'll upload this with this macro setting onto, I'll replace the FXP on my site for download, so that I'll be all routed there for you if you want to use it. But we're just going to automate this throughout so that it has just kind of a cool movement. So let's draw that in really quick. So in automation, there's also this little window that we haven't used. And it's it defaults to say read, so you can click points in and it's essentially reading the automation you put in there. There's 4 different other options in here, and I want to use the touch option. And you'll see what this is going to do. So I'm going to pull my playhead all the way back. And when this is going, I'm just going to kind of randomly pull up and down just based on feeling. And this is going to write in all my automation edits for me. I'm going to turn off that cycle as well, just so it goes through. And I'm just going to play this in the mix with everything and just kind of manually do it.
Fade away. Don't know what to say. If I start to fade away, will we be okay? If I start to fade away, don't know what to say. If I start to fade away, will we be okay? If I start to fade away, don't know what to say. If I start to fade away, will we be okay? If I start to fade away, don't know what to say. If I start to fade away, will we be okay? If I start to fade away.
All right, so now we have this automation written in, and I kind of want to just like brush this up a little bit, make sure it sounds all right soloed. I think right here we can probably like bring it down a little bit more. Maybe do something like that. And same thing here, I feel like it stays up there a little bit too long, so I'm just gonna click and drag this like that. All right, I think that sounds kind of sick. So now we just have like that kind of like variation movement. It's really subtle, but I think it's sick. Like that's something you can't really even like hear that much, but like again, I know it's there. I think it sounds cool. And once we get the submix, the bass submix like mix and louder and stuff too, it might become more present and stuff too. So okay, so let's move on to the drop now, because I want to get a couple of things going in here. And the first thing I want to get is, this is a personal preference thing that I like to do for my tracks, but I like to add these like chants in my drops. So I'm gonna go to Splice, and I'm going to go to the vocal section under Instruments. I'm gonna go View All, and I'm gonna try Shouts. So I found like a kind of like placeholder one. It has a little bit too much like punch to it, but I'm gonna drag this in, and I'm gonna quickly create a summing stack because I know I'm gonna use a few of these. And I'm gonna name this Effects Vox Mix. I'm gonna label it with this and this. And I like to put these on the upbeat, and I'm just gonna kind of copy these over. And then I like having like a little gap here in between the transitions. So something like this. All right, so we have one of those in. I'll mess around with some mixing and see if I can get it to kind of like fit a little better. Okay, I found this this sample here that I think sounds kind of sick. I usually like having like one girl and one guy sounding vocal. So let me kind of drag this, whoops, right here. I'm gonna pull this gain way down. So I think what I'm gonna do for now, I'm just gonna mute this channel and keep it as an idea if I want to use it. Gonna mute this track, delete this guy, and I'm gonna just drag this one. I'm gonna drag this right here for now. So I switched those chants to the upbeat on the part Bs, and I left the part As empty. For now, this is an idea that I'm going to revisit a little bit later because I don't have the vocals on the track yet. And once I have that, I'm probably going to be doing some type of like modulation or some type of effect with them. So I don't want to get too like wrapped up and stuck on this idea for something that I might not even be potentially using. So for now, I'm going to rename this real quick. And I'm just going to send this to our main reverb and give it a little bit of space in here. And something like that, just where it's like pretty quiet in the mix, you can't really hear it that much. We'll revisit this idea later. Again, this is another thing, a little bit subjective, but I like adding drum fills on my drops. I just think they sound really cool. So I'm gonna set a loop like here, and I'm just going to go into Splice and I'm going to find a bunch and just kind of pull them in and then arrange them kind of like what we did with percussion. All right, so I think I found something. So I'm going to pull these down a little bit real quick. So this is before mixing and everything. This is kind of what I came up with. And I'll kind of show you what's going on here in just a second. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make these a summing stack, and I'm going to kind of organize these really quick. So this I'm going to bring up into our effects. So I'm going to drag this bottom one down into here. Whoops. Just going to drag that guy down there, and I'm going to bring this up into our drum mix, and I'll put this, again, I'm just dragging it above this so that I can like rotate it into the drum mix. It's just kind of weird. That's how Logic works, but I'm going to add on this for a crash and name this DR crash and match it to our color there. I'm going to assign this guy at the bottom here, and this is like an impact thing, and I'm going to name this sum stack drum fills, and I'm going to use this little icon for it, and I'm also going to drag this to a drum mix. And to kind of sneak it into that drum mix, I'm just going to drag it up there and then drag this percussion at the bottom. Again, this is just how I like to arrange my stuff. And so now it's organized. So I'm going to start with these drum samples. So I found a few different loops. They were not necessarily on time, so I just made sure to flex time them and switch the algorithm to monophonic to kind of get them in time. For some of them too, there was like more information on there, and I just kind of cut out what I didn't need. So I'll solo each of these individually, and then we'll look at them as a whole again. So that's the first one. We'll just call that snare. All right, so we have these named. I'm gonna give these different icons. And I'm just going to start with this top one. And we haven't really used this function a lot, but this waveform zoom will make your waveforms adjust in size so that you can see them a bit easier. For mixing these two, I'm going to actually keep it off because I believe these are mastered at 0. Yeah, these are both mastered at 0 because they're hitting all the way up. So I'm going to pull this down to like -8. And I know that there's a lot of low information going on right here because there's those basses going. But if I solo this, you can see that it's already like clipped pretty aggressive because there's not a whole lot of transients. So compression for this is kind of unnecessary, but I do want to roll off a good amount of lows here. And this is a rare instance where I'm actually going to boost this section just to give it some more low mids to help give it a little bit more presence in the mix. And I'm probably going to roll off a little bit of these highs. Probably don't need all of those. Maybe something like that. And the only other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a clipper onto this and see if I can get a little bit more gain out of this. All right, so that sounds okay for now. We'll revisit that in a sec. Let's go to the next one. So this one we really don't need, probably up to like 200. I'm also going to filter this one, but not as aggressively. And again, we're just going to clip this, not even going to compress. It's not really your point. And I kind of I shortened this. I removed that last note. It was kind of like annoying to me. I just didn't like it. And then I ended up moving this back a little bit and getting rid of some of the original drum fills. So now this sounds like this. I just think it sounds a lot cooler. It's a little like cleaner. So let's go to the next one. And for this one, I am kind of guessing a little bit with this EQ. I'm just trying to keep it a little bit thin. I'm just, again, guessing. I'm going to get this louder and then make adjustments from there. I think this one's fine, kind of like this. It's just like kind of a background ambient thing. I don't know. It just adds noise, I guess. And these sound kind of fine together. So this is kind of like mids, highs, and then these are both kind of like lows. So I think that sounds okay. And I'll try and clip this one as well, just because I clipped the other three. It might sound a little bit quiet in context. All right, and now let's add some of these to the reverb. All right, and we're gonna have to turn this down a good amount because we are getting digital clipping because those are all super, super loud. And something I think I'm gonna do is I am going to use my first instance of a limiter, and I'm gonna set this output. I'm just gonna pull this down. This is Pro L2. This is in FabFilters bundle. I'm gonna pull this down to like, we'll try like -6. And what that did is you'll notice this max output. If I set this at Unity, this can't go above what I have this set to. So if I pull it down more, it's setting a ceiling for it. I think I'm going to keep this at about -8. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add gain to compensate for all this reduction I got. So if you look at these waveforms here, all this gray this is my my new volume, and this is original. So I'm losing all that gain. So I'm going to push it back. And I'm going to pull this down to like -4 here, or sorry, +4. And you can toggle this headphone and it'll show you the distortion being added. So it's a little bit more on the significant side, like around like -7 is kind of a lot. But again, these are already like distorted to hell, and I'm not really looking for clarity or even really dynamics with these. I'm just looking for like some type of movement to kind of break up the sound a little bit. Sounds like this. And later on, if I feel like this is a little too loud, I can just pull this channel fader, or I can pull this this gain down on it a little bit. Okay, so let's address this crash, and then we'll do the impact that we added. So I'm gonna send this to our drum verb, even though there's reverb on it, just to put it in the drum room. I'm gonna roll off some of the lows, not all of them. And I think maybe around here is good. I don't really want that much drive though. And I'm going to push the cymbal a little bit to the right, and then I'm going to add a tremolo to it. And I'm also going to apply one more filter underneath this, just because we added that distortion. It probably gave it back some lows. And we don't want that much tremolo, just something subtle like 15%. Just to give it a like weird kind of like movement. All right, now let's address this impact. First thing I want to do with this is I want to load on span to just kind of get a grasp on its stereo. So I would like to tame that a little bit because it is saturated with reverb, so it's going to have some slight phase issues. I'm just going to make a little band like this, switch it to side, and I'm just going to use like dynamics to kind of pull that down. That sounds okay. And then to make this a little bit more present while not having it be too loud, we can clip this. And just something like that, like these two, this and the crash are kind of layered now. I think that just sounds kind of cool. Okay, I want to add a riser here on this part. We can do something pretty simple. So I'm gonna I'll copy this this breath out because it's already gonna have kind of a concept I'm looking for. I'm gonna pull this. I'm going to have this be here. I'm going to copy this MIDI section here, and I'll paste it right here. And I'm going to bypass these, and let's try making something like quick and easy, something like a bright white. Okay, so I copied over that breath swell, and I changed this noise filter, sorry, I keep saying filter, this noise oscillator to this. It was Serum 2 noises, and it's this new white noise. And Everything from the other, the breath swell is the same, but I did adjust I added a chorus on with a little bit of mix on it just to give some dimension. And I added this oscillator A. I used this digital wavetable guitar harmonics, and I gave it 7 voices of unison. I left the detune and blend as is, and I applied a low pass and a high pass filter and pulled them up a little bit. And then I used LFO2 set to retrigger, 132nd BPM, kept this default shape, and I just applied this to the level to about here, and it sounds like this. I'm also applying this this LFO shape to the coarse pitch so that it rises, obviously. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly mix this, and then we're going to render this out in place. And I just mixed this really quick. All I did was add a kickstart to it to give it a pump, EQ rolling off the lows, some tremolo, and then some side EQ controlling some of those stereo signal to make sure it's mono compatible. We have that nice delay echo out, and I'm just going to add some gain using this plugin here. Something like that sounds all right. All right, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this impact here and copy it right here. And I'm going to do the same thing with this crash. So I'm just going to duplicate this and copy it right here. And I'm going to reverse both of these to create a swell. And I'm also going to add kickstart to both of these to give it a pump. And this crash I'm going to have to bring in a little bit just because it's a little bit too long, so like reversing it was extending over. And maybe here we can do like kind of like a throw like scream or something. So I'm gonna find one of those real quick. Okay, so I was going back and forth on some shouts. I ended up landing on this one, and it sounds like this. Now, there's a bunch of reverb that hits immediately after, so what I ended up doing was I put a volume automation, I put volume automation here. So right when that reverb starts to swell like crazy, it sharply goes down and then drops gradually. And then I just added this EQ that's just cutting this frequency. It was just a little like sharp and I didn't like it, so I removed it. And then I copied this down to another channel and I shortened the length of this. And I just wanted to get that initial like woo sound, this. And then I applied an echo to it and I set the wet at 100%, gave it like 50% feedback. 1/8 dotted, 0 dry, so it's not hitting at the same time as this original one. If this was completely dry, you would get the original signal. And I don't want that. I just want it to echo. So like that. And then I applied a tremolo to this as well. So it's going left and right. And I pulled this gain way down, so it sounds like this together. So it kind of takes off a little bit of that like reverb resonance. I might even pull this down a little more. And I think I'm actually going to bring this in and I'm just going to do a really aggressive fade out here just to kind of remove some of that tail. Something like that's good. And now I'm going to bring these into our effects vocal mix here, change their icon and rename them. Now I want to get one more drum fill. We can do a snare build out and a like riser build out. And I think the drop is pretty much solid. Okay, so that took kind of a long time, but I think I have the first half of the song pretty much where I want it. It's not going to be perfect because again, I'm still going to need vocals on here and that's going to dictate a lot of the like really fine tuning things. So I'm going to try and not get like too overwhelmed with that for right now. I'm going to play what I have so far and then we're going to break down every single thing that I ended up adding and ideas I had, what worked, what didn't work. And then we'll go into a couple of technical mixing things that I want to show you.
If I start to fade away, will we be okay? If I start to fade away, don't know what to say. If I start to fade away, will we be okay? If I start to fade away, don't know what to say. If I start to fade away, will we be okay? If I start to fade away, don't know what to say. If I start to fade away, will we be okay? If I start.
Okay, and we're gonna get an overload error message here. I'm going to continue playing the rest of the track and then afterwards I'll talk about this. So that's how it's sounding so far. Now I want to talk about right here. I want you to watch this meter. So when I hit play here, you're going to see a huge spike. So you saw it spike up a ton right there, and it's causing something called a system overload. Now that happens because your computer is trying to process way too many things at once. There's so much information going on, specifically all these bass synths from the drop and then all these effect synths that we have. There's two different ways that you can avoid this. One is to render stuff in place. So for example, when we talked about MIDI versus audio, one of the big advantages of audio is that it's less CPU intensive. That's because, for example, for this, just this bass, it is processing all of this information in here. Once it's done processing that, then it runs through all of these plugins and then it goes out. And if there's automation, it's processing that as well. With audio, all of that is rendered in place. So it's all already like in the sound. It's not running through a synthesizer or any of these processes. So it's saving a ton of CPU. Additionally, in any instance of these synthesizers, if you have more voicing, then it's also registering all those extra voices as well. So that's taking up a lot of computer power, and that's just one bass. You can see here we have 3, and then we have 3 different, like a down sweep and 2 risers going on. So those together are using up a ton of CPU. So we can render them to audio. Now, I don't really like doing that because a lot of times I go back in my project and I'll like adjust things that I was working on earlier. So if you control click into any, you can go to any channel to do this, and then just go to track header components. Right here, you'll see this option for freeze. So if you select that, you'll get these little snowflake icons next to your tracks. And what you can do is you can come down to, so I'll do it on these 3 tracks here. And I'm just going to hit spacebar. And what it's doing is it's freezing these tracks in place. And what that means is that it's almost like an in-between bounce. So it basically renders everything as audio without actually converting it to audio. And the result is that it saves a ton of CPU processing. But then what happens is if I go to this channel, I get this little snowflake icon. And if I click on anything, it says essentially that you can't use any of these because it's frozen. I can't access the synth either. So I would have to click this again to unfreeze it. I froze a few more tracks just to make it even smoother, but you'll see now when I play here, that was going like all the way up here to like 100% overloading, and now it's at like 25% just from freezing those. So now we can kind of work without any issues. The first thing that I really want to address before I go through everything I did was one of the things that I added was I added this pitch bend on these arpeggiated plucks. And you'll notice when I hit play here, it's detuned and sounds off. Like it sounds creepy and detuned. So if I go to this region, anytime you open up a region in your piano roll, if you press A, it'll bring up an automation window and you can select this little region down here. And I think by default it's on note velocity, but you can go to something called pitch bend in here. And this allows you to draw in, you can essentially bend notes up and like pitch them up off synths. And you can still do this within like Serum Synthesizer and draw an LFO and do a shape like that. Sometimes it's just a little bit faster to do it this way, especially when I just want to pitch up something quickly. But an issue that happens in Logic, for whatever reason, sometimes it'll just process these notes incorrectly until it gets to this region. So anytime I do this type of automation with this, what I like to do is I like to Command J, and that makes all of these one region. What I'll do is I'll grab this pitch bend automation and extend it the full length of the region. And I'll do that for this one as well. And I just do that. Sometimes just joining them will fix that problem. Sometimes you'll have to drag it all the way. So I just kind of drag it all the way to make sure that it's not affecting the notes in a weird way. If you're still having issues with that too, you can also just drag that and then render these in place. It's kind of annoying, but that's the only workaround I found for it. I'm pretty sure it's just a bug. So let's go through every single thing I ended up doing. Let's start with the drums. So the main things that I ended up adding were these drum fills. And how I usually do drum fills is I'll go into Splice and I'll go to Browse, Instruments, I'll do drums and look for fills. And I'll sort by like EDM and a bunch of different types. And I'll just grab some that I think sound cool. And then I'll drag those into my project, make sure that I flex time them so that they're on time. And then, for example, some of these like have this extra clip in it. I didn't really want all that. I just wanted this one little part here. So I shortened the notes. I'll go through and mix each one, put them into their own like drum fill submix, and just add some reverb on them to put them in the same space. Initially, I had a drum fill here. I'll probably use this for the second drop, but for now, I have this this all muted because there was just too many like drum fills back to back. It just sounded kind of like annoying. So I ended up landing on this drum fill. Just sounded like really cool. I like the pitch noise. So this is the EQ I did, just removing some of the low mids and band passing it a little bit. Did some EQ there just to control that like last snare hit. It was a little intense, and then clipped it a good amount and added some reverb to it. So that's the first thing that you're hearing right here. The next drum fill is over here, and it sounds like this. So I have 4 different drum fills that I used. So the first one sounds like this. And keep in mind too, like these are not necessarily going to sound great when they're soloed, but layered and in the context of the mix, they sound really cool. Like that one's very clipped. Sounds kind of like almost bad soloed. We have this first one, and same kind of thing. What I did was I bandpassed, and I actually boosted this low mid area just to get some more low mids in it. When I was listening back to it, it just sounded like it was missing that a little bit. So I added that, clipped it, and then gave it some reverb. Next one, I did the opposite. So I did a bandpass and then reduced the same section that the one before it was boosting to kind of give more room to the first one and to clear up any like muddiness on this one. Also clipped this one and didn't really compress it because it's already super compressed. These toms, instead of cutting here, I did a dynamic EQ because I didn't want to be too aggressive because a lot of the life of this drum fill lives here. So instead I used dynamic EQ to just control it when it gets too loud. And then I clipped it and reverb. And same thing with this. Here we actually did do a cut because it was bringing out a little bit too much mud. Same thing, bandpass, reverb, and clip. And then together. And I kind of layered these 3 on top of each other. Like they're all kind of like overlapping at parts. But because they're on beat with each other, it sounds really cool, and it adds like this really cool like layering effect. So that's what I did for those drum fills. Immediately after those drum fills, I kind of wanted to add a release, so I added this cymbal crash. I rolled off a little bit of the lows. I added some overdrive. I just pulled it until it sounded nice and pulled back some of the output gain there. Rolled off more of the lows that got reintroduced from adding distortion, and then gave it a very slight tremolo just to give it some movement. I sent this to the drum reverb, and then I panned it a tiny bit, +8. So it's just a tiny bit off to the right. I layered this with this impact. So it's like a clap impact just to get a lower tone with that like higher cymbal tone. And I use side EQ to reduce this entire stereo image a little bit, and then use dynamic EQ for the rest of it just when it gets too loud. And then I just clip this. My purpose for clipping it that aggressive too was to get more of this body in, to get more of those like low mids. Without that impact, it sounds like this. And then with the impact, and then together. So it just sounds kind of sick. Right over here, that cymbal, I wanted to create another swell and create kind of like almost like a ramp. So I ended up bouncing this in place and reversing it. And I kept all the same settings, but I added on a kickstart to give it like a pump so it's a little different. Sounds like this. And this was originally too long because if I like fully reverse it and set it the full length, it was just extending way too much. So I ended up shorting this one. That's why it's shorter than that one. And over here, I did the exact same thing with this drop impact. So that impact that's layering that crash, rendered that in place and reversed it and added kickstart. So they sound like that. And together. And I actually ended up pulling these guys in a little bit sooner. And I wanted to do that to make room for this sound, which I'll show you in just a second. And this sound is a snare impact. I put it under our effects tab just because it fit a little bit better than there versus the drums, but it sounds like this. So it's just like a snare hit with like a ton of reverb. I still sent this to, the main reverb track and then rolled off some of these lows that we don't need. And I ended up clipping this and then rolling off some more lows just so we can get a little bit louder without actually like giving more like digital loudness. Now, the other thing you're hearing here is this snare roll, and it sounds like this soloed. And I'll show you how I made this. So I had this sample, and it was this sample that I found. So I just dragged that into a sampler and I made a pattern region. And what I ended up doing is I made these little triplets here. I made this like drum pattern. And if you click on this drop down menu in Drum Machine Designer or in like a pattern region, you have this option to repeat notes here. So if you click and drag in here, you can like make them like rolls really easily. So I ended up doing 2 in the front, 2 in the front, and then 1 the rest of the way. And I processed this with EQ rolling off the lows, a compressor to get everything level, and then clipping it to give gain, and then some drum reverb. Now you're also hearing it pitch down. And what I ended up doing was I added a automation set to, I went to the sampler, pitch, and coarse tune, and that's just like your semitones for the sound. So when I hit play on this, you can see this moving down. And in context with everything, it sounds like this. Just sounded really cool. I don't know. Just I was trying to find like a snare roll, couldn't find one. And I was like, dude, I'll just make one. So, and I think the final thing for the drums is I added in on the outro part, I added in, I repeated these snares over here and they sound like this. In context. These are mixed almost the exact same way as how we did earlier, but there's a big difference. So this kickstart is added to these to give it kind of a pump and like sidechain it, but I didn't want that playing throughout the entire mix. What I did was I selected the kickstart, had its mix all the way at 0 because kickstart's kind of annoying. You can't change certain things in there. There's no like bypass, there's only a mix. So I basically set this on, turn the mix at 0 everywhere else except for right here when it's actually playing, and then it drops back down after, just so if I end up using these snares later on in the track, they're not like pumping immediately. Something you'll notice too, I changed all of this automation in here to be on these individual drums and not in this snare sum. And all of these like EQs and the pitch bend are bypassed in the sum stack. The reason I did that was because these are sending out to reverb. It was processing everything in here first, then sending that out to the reverb, and it wasn't processing like my pitch automation and my filter automation. So it was just sending like a full unfiltered and in the same pitch snare hit. And I didn't want that. I wanted the reverb to emulate what the snare was actually doing. So that is something to keep in mind. If you're sending stuff to a reverb, like a reverb auxiliary channel, and you're doing automation, that automation's not going to get read. Now I could have just sent this sum stack to that reverb instead and kept these dry so that it would follow what the sum stack is doing. But I didn't want this low snare to get the same amount of reverb as this high snare because it has a bunch of lower frequencies. So I kind of had to take the longer road and do it this way. And you can kind of see that by like all these like kind of like hidden lines in the background. That's all the automation that I just copied from up here. And this one being green, it's not actually doing anything because this is off. So. But yeah, that's just something kind of like technical with submixes. That's like one issue that can arise, but that's like a very niche thing that you're probably not going to really experience that much. I did like a couple of minor things like pulling down some of the gain, specifically on this guy. I pulled the gain down a little bit. It was just poking through the mix too much. So I made it a little bit more subtle. Now let's go to everything I did with the basses. So you kind of saw me draw in that automation to add that intensity to this. I re-uploaded this to my site so it has this macro on it now. But it just sounds like really sick. Just adds like this really cool like motion and intensity. So the verse basses are the same, kept the riser the same, but you'll notice that there's this new bass now. So I have these layered with 5 basses, but they sound like this. And what I was noticing was that when I was analyzing this in my submix and just from hearing it, I had a gigantic dip at like the 200 range. So like right here. There's like no mids there. So I ended up adding this in, and this is just kind of to fill in that space a little bit. And with this, Just gave a little bit more life to those mids there. Like I don't want a ton there, but I want some to just give it more presence and more body. So that's not being played through this part because I really don't want low mids when it's filtered and like reverbed. But as soon as the drop hits, I want those mids back in. And I just copied the same exact preset. And then I found this waveform that I thought sounded good. I think I kept most of the mixing pretty similar. I don't think I did anything super crazy in here. I did roll off the lows on here, and then for processing, I rolled off the lows. I did some slight dynamic EQ at the 200 range just because, again, like I'm adding this to add essentially like mud and body, but I also don't want it getting like super out of control. Compressed it, rolled off any extra lows, clipped it, rolled off lows again that were reintroduced from clipping, and then added the sidechain compressor to the kick. And it sounds like this. It's like very subtle in the mix. You can barely hear it. But without it, super subtle, but it adds just like that little extra like depth to the bass. The other thing I did melodically was in part 2, I added this little triplet at the beginning of the second one just to add some variation. So it does a triplet there. And then on the second region here, I just added some slight variation here, just to kind of like break it up from the first region. So together it sounds like this. Moving on to the bass leads for part B of the drop, you'll notice that kickstart is inactive on both of these. If you don't have kickstart, you actually don't need it. If you come into an LFO window, you can click where it says custom, and there's these sidechain modes. I'm not going to click it because it'll overwrite my sidechaining, but it'll set a automated sidechain in here. I drew in my own that kind of like matched what I originally had and what sounded good to me. So I have it starting at some volume, dropping a good amount, and then raising over time, and then like slight bend at the end. And all you have to do is you just set this to re-trigger and apply it to your level, and now it does this. And you can get like actually a lot cleaner results than what you can even get with kickstart in the first place. So if you don't have kickstart, you can just use this as like a serum effect and then create a sidechain mode and apply it to your level, and you'll get sidechaining like this. So I did more controlled, and the main reason I did this is a big issue with kickstart is you can't automate these rates that it's sidechaining at, which is super annoying. And I wanted to change the rate of these, so I ended up using this LFO so I can automate this rate. And that was used on this section here with these basses. You can hear it flutter here. And then the second lead, towards the end, I wanted it to do a slight filter out. So I added an EQ at the very end with a filter slope. So it's just all the way at the bottom. It's not really doing anything. And I automated this to come up and then also have a Q point, which is this guy, shoot up kind of to create a very slight resonance. And I ended up rolling it off to around 1170-ish. And the reason I picked that is because it's in key. It's in the root key of the song. So it just adds kind of like, it's not like an out of key, like off sounding thing. It sounds nice when it ends there. And if you're ever not sure what note it is too, I know my song is in G. So you can come in here and you can just type like G5 and it'll show me a spot there where I can boost, or G6. So like here. So it'll just kind of like show you spots where you can kind of like boost the gain. And sorry, I boosted the last note in the chain, which I believe is a D. Yeah. And that's around like 1170. In terms of mixing for this, so I applied the same exact sidechain setting I did with the sub. So these completely match. So I added a third oscillator to this, this sound too. So let me solo this. And if I bypass noise and oscillator A, I actually have to keep on oscillator B. You'll see the levels at 0. So if I only play this, it's not going to play anything. But in this menu, I'm actually modulating this sound through here. And then this knob is almost like a mix knob to blend these two together kind of. So that's how it's making sound. And sync essentially speeds up the waveform so it increases its pitch. So I just turned that up until it was in pitch with it. And then a lot of the time in bass house, what you'll see is another oscillator that's boosted 7 semitones up. It just has a really cool sound and it creates a harmonic. So I added that because I liked how it sounded. I pitched this up +3, and then I applied this same LFO rate to give it that sidechain pump, and I pulled it at a level that I thought sounded good. So this is what it sounds like. And you'll notice without it, it's going to sound like really weird. That's like really annoying. And with it on, I can maybe turn this detune down a little bit. And it's really subtle, but it just adds a little bit more dimension to it. So off. I don't know, I kind of like it. So that's what I did with this sound. And that's all the basses. Now let's go to the synth pluck real quick. I kept this the exact same. The only thing I ended up doing was adding this pitch bend at the very end. And then once it gets to here in the build, so all I did here was I made triplets and then I just copied these all the way through, and these notes that kind of like do that like drop down thing to give it like variance, I just added I kept those in place and then just removed the third triplet and made it drop down a little bit just to give it some cool variation. Once it gets here, it only does triplets in that same key to create a tension and so that I can pitch it up and like rise it. And then within the mix itself, I also increased that intensity on this other ARP that we made. So this one, I increased the intensity so it sounds like this. Just as that filter like kind of closes and it's like pitching up, it adds more intensity, so it's kind of cool. The other main thing I did was I applied volume automation here to drop it down in volume once those lead basses kind of come in. And I added this filter to kind of filter them out as they go. Now, while we're here, there is something I want to add. You used to have to use like a multi-band compressor for this, but now you can kind of just use Pro Q4. But just to demonstrate, I'm going to load in a multi-band compressor. And multi-band compression is kind of weird. When you're compressing a regular sound, you're controlling the dynamics of the entire sound and crushing it and then raising it back up. With a multi-band compressor, you have multiple bands, so you can target certain areas and be like, you know, like only the high dynamics really need to be controlled. I don't really want to adjust the lower ones. This is essentially what we were doing when we're like rolling off lows on the bus compressor in the past videos, but it's a lot more targeted. So what I want to do is I want to select this range from like 1 to 5K here, and I'm going to sidechain this to our bus. And so our bass mix is bus 11. So if I go to bus and choose bus 11, I'm sidechaining this in this area to control the dynamics in this range once those basses come in. But if they're not playing, which is the whole duration of like the verse here before the build, it's not going to get affected. Now, in order for this to work, if you're using Pro MB, you have to click this expert mode and click external, otherwise it won't work. And I'm going to bring a faster attack and a faster release here. We can leave the ratio at like 4:1. We can bring this range up, which is just like the most it can reduce it by. We'll bring that to like 5, and then we'll just mess with the threshold. So this is before, and then this is after. So it's pretty subtle, but it just gets this like main voicing area out of the way a little bit so that the basses can be more present. Another thing I wanted to bring up real quick too is in my volume automation, something you'll see me doing a lot. I matched this the start of this drop down to just after the end of this note, and I didn't do a straight drop down line. Sometimes when you do that, you can get like weird sounds. So I always try and slope these at least a little bit. So this just like slopes down immediately to the start of this region, but it's not like a direct straight line. That's like a very like minor thing, but something to keep in mind. If you're getting like a sharp drop down and it sounds weird, just add a slight slope to it and it'll sound better. All right, and with all that out of the way, let's move on to our the effects that we added. I'm not sure if I made this on stream or not, but we have this riser I made. And this is also available on my site. It's free if you want to download it. I used this guitar harmonics waveform on oscillator A, and I used essentially a bandpass filter, just cutting off some of the highs and lows. With LFO 1, I'm controlling this coarse pitch to make it rise in pitch. And then I applied some unison here, left blend and detune the same. And then I sent this into filter 1. Filter 1 is cutting off a bunch of the lows. And you'll see I have LFO 1 applying to the cutoff and the resonance to release some more of the highs as the sound increases in pitch, and also give it like a resonance sweep. And you'll notice this filter then goes into filter 2, and filter 2 is doing the same thing but with the lows. So it's using a high pass filter, whereas this is a low pass. And then this goes out to our main channel from there. Again, also this is set to 4 bars because it's a 4-bar riser, and it's on envelope mode so it doesn't start like resetting and give you weird clicks. In our effects, I added some soft clip distortion, some compression just for the end notes because they get a little sharp. EQ rolling off the lows here. A tiny bit of chorus, some delay at 1/4 rolling off lows, and then some reverb that extends as it gets higher in pitch. And then used kickstart with 1/4, EQ rolling off more lows, some tremolo for movement, and then some side EQ, just taming it. This is the drop impact and swell that we use to layer our cymbal, and then this is that snare impact. And the only other effect that I ended up adding was this. This is also available for free download on my site. So let's open this up and I'll show you how I made this sound. So like all risers, I believe I actually started with my default riser preset and I just made this slope. It's a 4-bar riser set to envelope, applying to the chorus pitch of all 3 oscillators. The first wavetable, I kept it as a default saw wave, and this one's going low to high. The others are at their starting point and going high. You can see if I shift option click here, it does that. So these 2 are starting here and then going up. 3 voices of unison, 7 and 5. Didn't have any low end processing here, just sent them out. And you'll notice only oscillator B is going to the first filter. The other 2 are actually just going bypassing this so that their high frequencies are getting rolled off. This noise filter too, it's a bright white. I also have this running through this filter to cut off the highs just so it's not like overwhelming. But I made this, this is the sidechain 1 setting. So I ended up applying this to the level of each of these oscillators to give it a pump feel. And then under macros, I have macro 1 is dictating the rate of LFO 2. And that's so that you'll hear it speed up. It's like fluttering faster. And that's because I turned this macro from 0 to 100. I could have also just selected LFO2 rate for that rather than using a macro. I kind of wanted to just do that to like demonstrate more purposes of why macros are useful because it can be a little confusing to see. All right, and then under our effects tab, we have hyperdimension, again, getting applied by that same LFO. You're gonna see that LFO applying to also the mix and the reverb. As more lows come out and more highs are introduced, we're adding more stereo imaging, running through a soft clip distortion, some multiband compression. I had a second multiband on here. I bypassed it because it was just a little too intense. I ended up using an all pass filter and bringing up the cutoff and adjusting the resonance until it sounded nice and giving it a little bit of drive. And I pulled this mix down a little bit just so it wasn't so intense. LFO4 is also doing our filter sweep here for our high pass filter, and then ping pong delay and some reverb. Post-processing, we have more lows getting rolled off, dynamic EQ for our side information, and then we also have this kickstart that's being applied. And I did this exact same thing where the mix is at 0, and I just wanted to get like this cool pump effect. I'll turn this off. So without that, it just kind of goes like straight. The reason why I added that kickstart there is I wanted it to match these snares. So if I solo it with these snares, they're in the same rhythm. Just sounds kind of nice. So that's the whole reason why I added that there. Okay, so the last thing that we need to go over are the effects vocals that I added. So I had this hey chant that I found. And what I ended up doing, I initially tried transposing it to get it like a deeper tone, but it started sounding weird. So I ended up adding on this little alter boy and just bringing the formant down to -2. Without it, it sounds like this. Just made it a little bit like deeper and like more like masculine, I guess. And then I rolled off the lows, and this is what's called a notch cut. It's where it's like a very specific cut that's very sharp. There was just this tone here that I really did not like. It was just like, it was poking through the mix so much, and it was all I could hear. So I just cut that out and then sent that to reverb. And when I do chants, a lot of the time I like to layer them. It depends on like how full the initial chant is. But with this one, I thought it was cool to get like an audience type sound to it. So I added on this. And I just have this rolling off these lows. Doesn't sound really good isolated, but then when you solo them together, it just adds like a lot. It just sounds kind of cool. It sounds like a actual group. I added in this yeah and woo sound. I have that sound, and then I also have this sound. I applied pretty similar processing. So for the yeah, what I did was I applied an echo, not all the way wet, so it's like not fully saturated, triplet and 75% feedback, 100% dry because I want it to echo off its own source. I applied our main reverb to this and pulled the mix down to like 60%. And then I applied tremolo that's a little bit more present and rotating at a half rate. Pulled down the smoothing just so it's a little bit more present. And then this woo, I did a bandpass on it just to control it a little more. And then I applied the same exact echo, delay, and tremolo so they're rotating the same. So if I solo them, they move the same. And then I just rolled off a bunch of this low because there was like breath coming in that I didn't want in there. And those act kind of as a layer. Instead of having a crash here, I could have kind of a shout and it sounds kind of cool. So it sounds like this. It's like pretty subtle, but it like just adds something. I just like it. And then I added in this shout here. Again, rolling off that like really long tail. And all I did was reduction here. It was just really sharp. I didn't like it and it was poking through, so I rolled that off. And then I applied an echo here. And that's just going left and right. And because this one's not extending, I didn't need this EQ on here, so I just didn't put it on. Because that sharp harmonic I was hearing, it really wasn't present until like after this point. It's like in this body here where it becomes really noticeable. So I didn't add that EQ on because I didn't need it. I believe this is a vocal that I found that I was originally going to try and use, but I didn't end up liking it as much. I kept it muted just because I might use it later, but it sounds like that. Kind of good, but it sounds like almost like a little dog barking or something, so it was kind of annoying. Okay, so now that we're through everything that I added, two final quick things is how we remove those kicks on the last couple of hits in the verse. I also did that here. And the reason I like doing that is it makes room for drum fills, and it also like lets your mind kind of reset back to drop A. So it's A, B, and then back to A. So it's like, oh, okay, it's coming back. And I also did this, I always do this at the end of drops. Any end of a section, I almost always do this. So here it sounds like this. In conjunction with it filtering out some of the lows of that bass too, it just kind of like resets your mind and then lets whatever comes next feel like more impactful. The only other thing I did is I copied over this kick section, our claps, and our open hi-hat. And then I copied over this sub. Just, it was like ending super abruptly and it was kind of annoying. So I don't know if I'm going to keep that yet, but for now we have this. And then we can build off that in a little bit. So now that we have those tracks frozen, I'm going to end this video by just hitting play here, and we can kind of listen to what we have so far.
Fade away.
right, sick. So I was just kind of like checking it in mono and comparing it to stereo throughout some points just to kind of like hear it. I was also kind of looking at this, just kind of like visualizing how everything looks at the moment. So far it looks okay. We can probably give some more boost to our sub and everything. And we're actually in the next video, we're going to be doing submix mixing and some more kind of advanced routing to get everything a little bit fuller. And we are then going to start working on the second half of the track. We'll get this all copied over and stuff, and we'll be able to start kind of wrapping this project up pretty quickly. So that's going to be it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.